This is why the Pistons are 3-35.
The complete history of sports can effectively be summarized through its various awe-inspiring streaks. Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak and Wayne Gretzky's 51-game point streak have stood the test of time atop the pantheon of baseball and hockey legends respectively. Just like those sports, basketball and the NBA are rich with illustrious accomplishments. From the Celtics' 8 consecutive championships between 1959 and 1966 to the Lakers' 33-game win streak during the 1971-1972 season and extending to the present day, with Steph's impressive 268-game streak of making a three-pointer and LeBron's ongoing double-digit game streak spanning 17 seasons. These streaks provide a brief window into the dominant forces of each era for future generations who may not have witnessed them firsthand, thereby immortalizing the teams and players that made significant sacrifices and surpassed their competition to achieve the pinnacle of excellence. However, while most streaks command undying reverence and respect, some are marked by infamy and ridicule. Today, the Detroit Pistons travel to Boston to face the Celtics and try to avoid this very fate. What's at stake? The longest losing streak not just in the NBA, but in US sports history, as the Pistons currently sit at a 2-28 record after starting the season 2-1. Even after 27 straight losses, game number 31 would be the Pistons' toughest challenge yet, with the Celtics not only being arguable championship favorites, but also unbeaten at the TD Garden. Detroit's chances at victory were slim at best. And yet somehow the Pistons came out of the gate red hot, playing perhaps their best basketball of the season. Cade Cunningham's stellar performance played a pivotal role as the young guard scored 22 points on an impressive 9 of 13 shooting, outshining Jason Tatum and propelling his team to a commanding 19-point lead at halftime. However, the narrative of the second half couldn't have been more different. Tatum and Porzingis played every second of the third quarter for the Celtics, combining for 23 points and vaporizing the Pistons' lead in just 11 minutes. The Latvian unicorn also added 11 points in the fourth quarter, including a 3 to give Boston a 6-point lead with just under 2 minutes left. Even then, the Pistons weren't done. Thanks to some clutch shots, first from Jaden Ivey and then from Bojan Bogdanovic, Detroit managed to pull back in the final seconds and force overtime, where the difference in team quality finally showed, and the Pistons, despite their valiant effort, succumbed to the Celtics, thus earning them the dreaded title of the worst team in basketball. But how did the Pistons reach this point? What went wrong and who's to blame? A quick look at Detroit's roster reveals that they're not merely a team with subpar players intentionally set up to lose. The root cause of their recent struggles runs much deeper than that. So to answer these questions, we must delve into Pistons' history, spotlighting the various mistakes and poor decisions that led them to hit rock bottom. Talking about the Pistons without mentioning the bad boys is as big a sin as visiting Detroit and not trying their deep dish pizza. The similarities don't end there, as both the bad boy Pistons and Detroit style pizza are extremely controversial, with ardent fans and equally passionate haters. Just the right blend of bad and good. The Bad Boys, as NBA history's premier villains, were so bad that their physical, borderline unsportsmanlike brand of basketball is still referenced today whenever a player commits a hard foul. Simultaneously, they were so good that they are the only team boasting a winning playoff record against Jordan, Magic, and Bird, whom they all faced during their primes on their way to secure back-to-back championships in '89 and '90. Crediting this impressive accomplishment to physical intimidation alone would be simply foolish. The 80s Pistons were a top-class organization from top to bottom, starting with the owner, Bill Davidson. Mr. D, as he's lovingly known in Detroit, deeply cared about his players and their families, built a brand new arena that Pistons fans would proudly call home, and during an era when teams only flew commercial, he bought a private plane, giving his team a clear competitive edge. But perhaps Davidson's greatest strength was his ability to surround himself with talented people and position them for success, such as team general manager Jack McCloskey. During his 13-year tenure, Trader Jack worked restlessly to create a true challenger to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference. To that end, he made over 30 trades, chief among them being the Adrian Dantley-Mark Aguirre swap, the move that put the Pistons over the top. His work on the draft is also admirable, selecting key team pieces outside the lottery and even well into the second round. Overseeing these key pieces was head coach Chuck Daly, a charismatic communicator who got the most out of his players. Possessing the mettle to keep even the biggest egos in check, Daly successfully convinced his players to fully buy into his demanding defensive schemes and, most importantly, one another. He also exhibited superb versatility, adapting his strategies based on the players at his disposal and tailoring his coaching style to leverage the strengths of his roster. And speaking of roster, the bad boys were more than hardwood brutes. For every Lambeer pants or every Mahorn hip check, there was a Thomas no-look pass or a Dumars step-back fadeaway. The Bad Boy Pistons stand as a vivid example that championship-caliber teams are defined by robust camaraderie and seamless coordination across all levels of the organization, from ownership and the front office to the players and the coaching staff. And the biggest testament to this is the repeated success of this model 16 years later. Following the unremarkable 90s, Bill Davidson looked at hiring people with bad boy DNA to bring success back to Detroit. Lucky for him, Joe Dumars had just retired in '99 after spending his whole 14-year career with the Pistons. Giving the GM job to a former player with no previous front office experience could have been a disaster, but in the end, it proved to be the best decision possible. Joe Dumars meticulously assembled a roster of talented players who were undervalued by the previous teams and brought in a coach who prioritized playing their game the right way to lead them. The result was a dynamic mix of hungry, like-minded personalities, each with a point to prove and a willingness to go to war for each other. So much so that they achieved the seemingly impossible, the biggest NBA Finals upset in history, humbling the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, who were fresh off of a three-peat, and securing Detroit's third championship. Unfortunately, however, all good things must come to an end. On March 13, 2009, Pistons owner Bill Davidson passed away at the age of 86, leaving behind a lasting legacy of success. In June 2011, after 2 years of bidding wars, his widow Karen sold the team to Tom Gores for a reported fee of $325 million. Gores took over a team that was already in a downward spiral, as Detroit had missed the playoffs in 2011 and 2010, after an impressive run of 8 consecutive postseason appearances, including 4 conference finals and 2 NBA finals. Neither the new owner's presence nor any of his moves changed any of that. In fact, what has unfolded between Gore's acquisition and the present day amounts to the absolute decimation of the identity of one of the league's most historic franchises. Since 2012, with 4 different general managers and 6 different head coaches coming and going, the Pistons have only managed 2 playoff appearances in the last 12 years. As if that wasn't bad enough, they have also failed to secure a single postseason win, making them the sole franchise with such a record in this time span. And mind you, very little of this incompetence was by design, with Detroit fully embracing tanking in 2021. In all the previous years, they were so awful they even sucked at losing. Add some allegations about a toxic working environment to this directionless franchise, and before you know it, you might end up with a Donald Sterling, Robert Sarver situation. Cue the sell the team chance.
117 to 106, just over a minute left.
To be fair to Tom Gores, these allegations neither have the scale of Sterling's Clippers and Sarver Suns, nor indict him personally, but the behavior and performance of the people he chooses to employ undoubtedly reflect on him. Above all, his general managers. So let's see how they fared since he took over. Arguably one of the most challenging and critical tasks for a general manager is roster construction. NBA teams typically acquire players through three primary avenues: the draft, free agency, and trades. However, for small market teams like Detroit, securing important pieces during free agency is a rarity to say the least, as players naturally gravitate towards destinations like Los Angeles, Miami, and New York City for the lifestyle advantages they offer. Consequently, the Pistons GMs will solely be evaluated based on the trade transactions and their draft selections. Starting with the latter, by analyzing the statistical impact of all 300 players who have been drafted between 2011 and 2020, it is possible to calculate the average value of each draft pick measured in value of a replacement player. A box score metric which calculates the points per 100 team possessions that a player contributes above a replacement level player. The resulting chart follows an expected decline in value of a replacement player for later draft picks, albeit with some notable outliers. Giannis at 15, Gobert at 27, Jimmy Butler at 30, Jokic at 41, and Isaiah Thomas at 60 significantly elevate the average value of a replacement player of their respective draft positions, cementing their status as some of the biggest draft steals in NBA history. With due credit to the people who selected them. Do the Pistons boast any similar draft steals? Well, kinda. Comparing the value of a replacement player of the selected players and the average value of a replacement player of their draft positions, Andre Drummond and Chris Middleton stand out as Detroit's biggest hits, even though they gave up on Middleton after only 27 games. On the other hand, the data also reveals a concerning trend. Since 2014, when Joe Dumars resigned as president of basketball operations, only one player selected by the Pistons has outperformed his expected value of a replacement player: Bruce Brown, who was, you guessed it, traded after 2 seasons, while Sekou Doumbouya in 2019 and fellow Frenchman Killian Hayes in 2020 stand out as their most notable misses. Wasting 2 consecutive first-round picks, let alone lottery ones, can be a death sentence for any NBA franchise, but it is especially problematic for Detroit given how few opportunities they've had to rectify their mistakes. In the last 13 drafts, the Pistons have made only 11 first-round selections, a very small amount given that losing teams, such as Detroit, tend to stockpile draft picks for a chance at a superstar-level player who they can build around. Indeed, out of all the teams with 11 or fewer first-round picks over the last 13 years, the Pistons stand alone as the only team not to make it past the first round of the playoffs. The Knicks, Wizards, and Pelicans have made the conference semifinals. The Grizzlies, Mavericks, and Clippers have made the conference finals, and the Bucks, Lakers, and Raptors have all been crowned NBA champions. Detroit's struggle to acquire the superstars they need has been exacerbated by a string of remarkably poor luck in the lottery, especially when compared to the other 5 teams with an average draft position inside the top 10. Over the last 13 drafts, the Pistons have moved back a net total of 11 spots, including as recently as 2023, when they lost the number 1 pick to the Spurs. This underscores the unpredictable nature of the NBA, where luck often plays a significant role alongside a team's decision-making prowess. For instance, had the Cavaliers not moved up 7 spots in 2011 and 8 spots in 2014, LeBron James may not have ever returned home to win the franchise-only championship. Similarly, if the Kings and Pelicans had not struck gold by drafting Zion Williamson and De'Aaron Fox, it is uncertain whether they would be in a better position than the Pistons are today. Drafting is undoubtedly one of the toughest tasks for a front office, and while Detroit's track record may fall below par, some of their missteps are understandable given the circumstances. What isn't understandable is Detroit's handling of the few tradable assets it has amassed over the years. According to Basketball Reference, since 2011, 14 Pistons players have concluded the season with a value over replacement player greater than or equal to 1.5. Among these, 3 were drafted, 5 were signed in free agency, and 6 were acquired through trades. However, their total return from leveraging these assets, alongside any other players or draft picks involved in their trades, amounts to only Isaiah Stewart, Quentin Grimes, the Blazers' first-round pick in 2025, and 5 second-round picks between 2024 and 2028. This represents a surprisingly modest return for 13 years' worth of assets. How can this be, you may ask? Out of the 14 players, only 3 were traded for assets that remain part of the Pistons' present and future. The remaining 11 were either lost for nothing when their contracts expired or traded for players who were subsequently waived and draft picks that failed to materialize into meaningful assets. The most glaring example of this, and perhaps one of the most prominent reasons for the Pistons' decline, is ironically their biggest blockbuster move since the Mark Aguirre-Adrian Dantley swap, the Blake Griffin trade. Don't get me wrong, Griffin as a point forward and his team's primary option on offense was incredibly entertaining to watch and productive to boot, earning him an appearance at the 2019 All-Star Game and a place on that year's third All-NBA team. But while Griffin's play drastically raised the Pistons' floor, essentially making them a playoff team all on his own, his weak supporting cast meant their ceiling was nothing more than a first-round exit. Thus, in the 4 seasons Blake spent in Detroit, the Pistons were stuck in the limbo every NBA team wants to avoid. Too good for a high draft pick and simultaneously too bad to make a postseason run. Worst of all, Griffin's tenure with the Pistons came to a close when he got waived in 2021, meaning Detroit got 0 return for their best player at the time and all the assets they used to get him. This outcome is precisely what should be expected when a coach assumes a front office role, as was the case with Stan Van Gundy, since nobody in his position would choose to coach a team designed to lose, even if that's the best strategy for the franchise in the long run. Fortunately, after the end of the Griffin era, the Pistons finally embraced a long overdue rebuild under new general manager Troy Weaver, and only a year after his appointment were rewarded with the first overall pick, which they used to draft Cade Cunningham, the central pillar of the current Pistons squad. But Weaver so far doesn't seem to have learned from the mistakes of those who came before him, exhibiting questionable roster construction, trading players a year too late, mishandling the 2020 draft, and overpaying. Most recently, his coach, as last June, Monty Williams agreed a then-record 6-year, $78 million contract, making him essentially unfireable regardless of his team's performance. And so, we arrive at this season. The Pistons kicked off the season with the NBA's youngest starting lineup, a group so fresh-faced that it even surpassed the youthfulness of a collegiate basketball team, being on average more than a year younger than the starters featured in Michigan State's season opener. Teams so young are a double-edged sword for a coach. On the positive side, players are more energetic and more coachable during the early stages of their careers. On the flip side, non-superstar players can be extremely raw throughout the rookie scale contracts and thus exhibit obvious weaknesses in their game. Furthermore, inexperience can lead to error proneness and poor decision making, a coach's worst nightmare.
In your eyes, you're good guys! Fuck you, everybody! Fuck you, okay?
Inside the basketball court, these take the form of fouls and turnovers, and that is backed by the numbers. According to data from the 3 most recent seasons, players under the average age in the NBA commit more turnovers and more fouls than those aged 27 and older. Specifically, the foul difference between the 2 groups is equal to 1 standard error value and the turnover difference is equal to 3. Thus, it's no surprise that between 2021 and now, Detroit's young roster has ranked dead last in the league in both foul differential and turnover differential, 2 metrics that measure the number of fouls and turnovers a team commits in comparison to their opponents. Naturally, a team that commits more fouls than it draws and more turnovers than it forces is expected to be at a significant possession disadvantage and therefore a significant point disadvantage. Over the last 200 or so games, the Pistons have had to overcome on average nearly a double-digit deficit solely from turnovers and fouls, which is more than twice from the second worst team. the Portland Trail Blazers. It's safe to say that Monty Williams' coaching this season hasn't helped alleviate these issues for the Pistons. Let's see why. First up, Coach Williams is known for utilizing a switch-heavy defensive scheme. When faced with a screen, Detroit defenders are instructed to swap defensive assignments regardless of the players involved in the action. By switching the pick and roll instead of more aggressive strategies like blitzing or hedging, the Pistons essentially forgo trying to force turnovers in favor of preventing open driving lanes to the rim. However, Detroit lacks the versatile defensive wings that are necessary for this defensive coverage to work. Thus, more often than not, the switch creates big mismatches for the Pistons defense that leave their players no other choice than fouling in order to prevent the other team from scoring. Detroit fouls on 14% of pick and rolls, a league-high frequency, and also allows the second most points per possession. In a team with a desperate need for defensive specialists, the pick and roll stands out as their most notorious weakness on that end of the court. On offense, Monty Williams' play calling can be described as basic and antiquated. The Pistons' offense relies predominantly on pick and rolls and spot-ups, which are used on almost half of their offensive possessions. These play types are stationary in nature, as outside of the players who are actively involved in the action, everyone else just has to stand on the perimeter and spread the floor. In contrast, play types that necessitate off-ball movement and a constant flow of the basketball, like cuts, dribble handoffs, and shooting off screens, are only used on 15% of possessions. Here's a typical offensive possession for the Pistons. Cade Cunningham brings the ball down the floor while Jalen Duren sets a screen at the top of the key. As Duren isn't a threat from beyond the arc, he drives towards the basket, with Cade following suit. Usually, Cade will either attempt to score at the rim or take a mid-range shot. Should the defense converge on him, however, he will pass the ball to the trailing Duren or kick it out to one of the wings positioned along the baseline for a three. All this sounds great in theory, but in reality, two main issues hinder its overall performance. Number 1, the complete lack of player movement on the perimeter makes the Pistons predictable and facilitates turnovers. Since the ball has to travel long distances to reach its target, opposing defenses can easily react and get a steal, leading to quick points on the other end. The pick and roll exemplifies Detroit's absence of a traditional pass-first point guard, with both Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, who lead the Pistons in pick and roll possessions, being adept at driving to the basket but less skilled at creating opportunities for their teammates. Consequently, due to their stationary wings and without any playmaking guards, the Pistons have the 4th highest turnover frequency on pick and rolls this season. The second reason for Detroit's pick and roll underperformance is their serious shooting struggles. Since 2021, no team in the NBA has shot worse from 3-point range than the Pistons, who also rank below the league average on 3-point attempts. This stems mainly from the chronic deficiency in shooting talent. Over the same time span, the Pistons' only player with at least 10 field goal attempts per game who shot above the league average from downtown is Bojan Bogdanovic, who predominantly scores from spot-up shots. With him starting the season with a strained calf and missing the first 20 games, it was up to the others to pick up the slack in his absence. Unfortunately for the Pistons, the results are dismal. Detroit's most frequently used players on spot-ups, Jaden Ivey and rookie Oscar Thompson, are both shooting below 33% on catch-and-shoot threes. Consequently, defenders assigned to them can safely sag off and clog the paint, forcing Cade Cunningham into contested, low-value shots, further diminishing the Pistons' pick-and-roll efficiency. Detroit's abysmal three-point shooting is exacerbated by Monty Williams' poor rotations and lineup selections. In an era when it's almost unheard of to see two non-shooters sharing the court, the three most used Pistons lineups feature not one, not two, but three players shooting below 30% from the outside. With the Pistons in such a dire need of players who can space the floor, it is absolutely criminal how Marcus Sasser only gets 16 minutes per game, less than players like Killian Hayes, Isaiah Livers, Marvin Bagley, and Kevin Knox, who aren't even on the roster anymore. Sasser is a natural fit alongside Cade or Ivy thanks to his ability to knock down catch-and-shoot threes at an elite rate, but he has also shown incredible promise as a shot creator off the dribble. Hence, he can ease their ball handling load and allow them to play off the ball as slashers, a role in which they excel. But so far, he has been overlooked. kept from playing alongside the two talented guards and instead reserved for Monty's all-bench lineups, and the less said about them, the better. So by coach's design, the ball is in Cade Cunningham's hands for as much time as possible. Cunningham, who predominantly played as a shooting guard alongside Killian Hayes or Corey Joseph during his rookie season, has undergone a significant transformation into Detroit's primary point guard and decision maker. This evolution began in 2022, before his season-ending injury, and this season has yielded remarkable results. Cunningham is posting career highs in points, assists, and efficiency across all shooting metrics. In fact, his contributions to the Pistons are so substantial that his impact on the team's field goals, assists, and turnovers most closely resembles that of Devin Booker and LeBron James. Cade's superstar potential is undeniable. Yet, as it is often said, there are levels to the NBA player, and at this juncture in his career, Cade is closer to Bradley Beal and Austin Reeves than he is to Booker and LeBron. Consequently, one could justifiably argue that the Pistons are overly reliant on Cunningham and impeding the development of their other young talents, particularly Jaden Ivey, who appears notably more assured and effective when given opportunities to handle the ball rather than merely awaiting passes in the corner. Both Cunningham and Ivey boast similar skill sets, excelling as self-shot creators with a knack for driving to the rim. Therefore, they tend to thrive in the absence of each other and not in tandem. Nevertheless, despite the potential drawbacks of over-reliance on Cunningham, he remains one of the few bright spots in Detroit's season, consistently proving himself as a cornerstone player with a remarkable ability to single-handedly carry his team on the court. So, if Cade were to miss 2 weeks due to injury, the Pistons would surely spiral into complete disarray, right? Right? The trade deadline came and went, bringing with it multiple changes. During deadline week, the Pistons emerged as the most active team in the league, orchestrating a series of moves to bolster their roster. Notably, they shed some deadweight and addressed their need for 3&D wings by acquiring Simone Fontecchio and Quentin Grimes. Is the new roster more valuable than before? Probably not, but it certainly fits better. Just by adding some competent NBA-level rotation players who can defend and shoot, the Pistons finally look like a real NBA team, even with all the absences they've had to endure and many coaching mistakes still persisting. The new rotation pieces are also a perfect fit around Detroit's young core and will surely help accelerate its development, giving Pistons fans hope for the future. For his handling of the trade deadline, as well as his success in the 2024 draft, with rookies Oscar Thompson and Marcus Sasser performing well above expectations, it seems that Troy Weaver has managed to save his job, at least for now. But is he really the right man to take the Pistons to the next step moving forward? Answering that question isn't easy. Undeniably, his track record of errors and ineptitude still looms large, though the proactive approach he exhibited this season, particularly in rectifying past mistakes, is a clear sign of courage and organizational maturity. Everything looks to be decided this upcoming free agency, where the Pistons look to be going all in for one or two big names. With $65 million in cap space at their disposal, they aim to secure star players from teams nearing the second apron of the luxury tax, leveraging their financial advantage to secure talent at a discount. It's a smart move, driven by the team's desperate need for high-end talent, albeit a very risky one. Failing to secure these assets would likely result in the Pistons having to overpay mediocre players in order to fill out the roster, making them essentially untradeable and moving the rebuild back to square number one. The main takeaway from this video should be that the Pistons score was never the reason for the lack of success, despite what many NBA media outlets would have you believe. Lineups comprised of Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren are not only full of youth, athleticism, and potential, they also win, having a positive net rating despite all of their collective weaknesses. Add Oscar Thompson's elite defense and Marcus Sasser's dead-eye shooting to that mix, and you have 6 of the top 9 of a very competitive squad. In the era of Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, Anthony Edwards, and Victor Wembanyama, the Pistons will likely never be considered favorites. But that doesn't mean they won't prevail. Historically, their championships were never a matter of having the best team or the biggest superstar. Rather, they won thanks to their relentless dedication on and off the court, their unbreakable familial bonds with each other, their unwavering mental toughness, and their resolute, never give up attitude. After all, no team in the NBA embraces being the underdog quite like the Detroit Pistons. Thanks for watching.